I'm going to screen record this and upload this because these are the notes that I took while researching and verifying my family's history. So my father, his name is Robert Ramonte Holliday. His father name is Robert Earl Holliday. His father is Robert Lee Holliday, or sometimes just Robert Holliday. Now, I knew my great-grandfather. He passed away a day after my 21st birthday. He was almost, if not 100 years old, Grandpa. Grandpa was raised by his aunt and uncle because his mom, his dad, and his siblings were all killed in a windstorm in Mississippi. Very important. So my grandfather, my great grandfather, Robert L. Holliday, was raised by his uncle and his aunt, William Holliday and Clara Shepherd. William Holliday parents were Moses and Ann Myers Holliday. So these were my great grandfather's grandparents, making them my great 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 grandparents. Now, this census going in the 1850s is found for free blacks and mulattoes in South Carolina. There's also a website for the black abolitionists in England during this time in correlation with the slave trade. Now, Ann Myers, which was my great great grandfather's uncle's mother, so his grandmother, she was registered as a mulatto. It's essential to know that mulatto goes back to muladwad and muladi, which begins to refer to the indigenous or the first Christians, and we know that the first Christians will be called the Israelites, but this branch would be the Northern Kingdom, going into Spain, Portugal, all of Europe in 722 BC. And so this was the word muladwad to begin to say the first indigenous Christians born amongst Arab but not of Arabic bloodline, to make a differentiation between the Ishmaelites, the Edomites, and the Israelites during that time. It's a misnomer to believe that you have to have one white parent, and one black parent to be a mulatto. That's not a mulatto. That's called a mamzer. Totally different things. To be a European, you could be a black European. A Caucasian and European are not the same thing. And that's what we need to realize. Caucasians literally come from the Caucasus Mountains. You can be black and be European. And this is something that I'm not sure how we miss out on this. So Ann Myers was a mulatto. She was a farmer. Her father was a Holliday, and it's essential to know that like these families married into one another, and they were in England. What do you see still taking place in England today? These are biblical markers when we begin to look at the Old Testament, the New Testament. You had cousins intermarrying into one another to keep the lineage. But what do I know, right? And so her father was Thomas Holliday, and her mother was Cornelia Miami Holliday. They had a son named Earl. That's where my daddy, rest in peace, granddaddy, gets his middle name. This is my family's history. William Holliday, which was my great-grandfather's uncle who raised him. Okay, and mind you, I had this family oral tradition, history, and then when I began to search on Ancestry.com and looking for things, it began to line up with how my great-grandfather was raised. So my great-grandfather's uncle, who would have been his father's brother, he was also listed as a mulatto. So my great-grandfather's guardians, who were his blood aunt and uncles, were listed as mulattoes. And they were found on the migration list from England into South Carolina. So these mulattoes are coming into South Carolina during this time. And this would begin to constitute for the free blacks and mulattoes who left England during this time. And mind you, it's a census book on Amazon that you can purchase to see if your ancestors are part of these free blacks and free Negroes. It's very important to know. You could Google this In 1786, the Sultan of Morocco began to claim these free blacks and free mulattoes and recognize the United States as sovereign and tell the United States that these people were Moors. And why is that? Because they originally came from Morocco, from Chad, from the Senegambia, Moriscos, those who were converted to Muslim. And so my ancestors, the Hollidays, were the mulattoes and the Negroes migrating from England into South Carolina. William Holliday's father name was Moses. He was first classified as white and then black. So when I began to pull up pictures of my grandfather, I don't know how many years removed, Mayor Leonard Holliday, and they have him depicted as a white man in England serving at the same time as King James. This is the passing population. My daddy, his daddy were very dark complected men. Granted, the Hollidays married into Choctaw Native Indians, the Burnetts, who were very dark complected as well. These are black people groups. My grandmother, my father's mom, her great-grandfather lived with her. He was right from Ireland. He was my complexion, still classified as a mulatto. So mulatto does not always mean passing. Moses Holliday, father name was Thomas Cummings Holliday, and his mother name was Rowena Clemmings Holliday. They were listed as black. They were never listed as white. But their children came out mulattoes. So mulattoes is clearly in the Holliday bloodline. Thomas' father and his mother, Thomas' father and his mother, Elizabeth and Moses Holliday, were listed as mulattoes. So Thomas Cummings Holliday was named after, you see these names just keep repeating themselves. No, Moses was another Thomas. Okay, William's father, Moses, was the mulatto. And then there was another Moses as well. And so when we begin to see, Thomas' father name was John Holliday. And Maria Grames Spite was his mother. So what began to take place is that Thomas, he was listed as black because he couldn't pass. And so what would happen, just as Abraham Lincoln began to say that he was afraid to go back home because back home he would be a slave, his own father indentured him as a servant. So what ended up happening was John and Maria Holliday, they were coming over into the Americas. And this is during the time of the slave trade. And so in order for their son to be registered and classified as free, they began to indenture him into them. And so then when they began to come into the United States, they could no longer pass, and then they was classified as mulatto and then black. So John and Maria were actually, this is Thomas' parents. He couldn't pass, remember, but they could until they got here. John and Maria were actually baptized in England. I have all of these records. And they had a son named Robert. That's my father's name. That's my grandfather's name. That's my great-grandfather's name. John's father was William Holliday, and he was born in England. And William's parents' name was Samuel Holliday and Elizabeth Duggar. Samuel Holliday was baptized in England. Samuel Holliday, when he began to come into the Americas, he was registered as a Quaker in North Carolina. Quakers carried out the mission of St. Peter, which is to convert the Jews in the diaspora. The Quakers and the Protestants were fighting and protesting against the Roman Catholic Church. So these would be your black abolitionists, the same people and the lobbyists who went into Canada to found Nova Scotia and became the Cajuns. Except for they were leaving France, and my relatives were leaving England, although I have some French relatives as well in New Orleans. So when we began to look, William's father is Thomas Holliday, who was from Ireland and has records in England and the UK. Thomas' father is also named Thomas, and his mother is named Hannah Holliday. Thomas' father, that Thomas, is named John. John was born and baptized was born in England, and he was baptized in Ireland. John's father name is John, and his mother name is Anne Farmer. That John parents are Leonard Holliday and Anne Montagu. I literally just ran down, y'all, my family's history. I'm not gonna sit up and anyway. He was born perhaps in circa 1550 in Rodborough, which would be Redborough, which is why he was depicted as a white man with red hair, in Gloucestershire, and this is clearly where the Jews lived. I'll go into that maybe if I go live or something tomorrow. And Leonard Holliday was the son of the cloth maker William Holliday and Sarah Bridges, and this goes all the way back to 1482 to 1519. And somebody to say these are man-made documents. Family keep their court records, but I have all of the boat records. I have the baptism records, everything verified through the government websites and so on and so forth. But I also have history backing up this fact. And so new Christians were in Redborough, England. They talk about that the Jews was expelled. These are people that weren't conversos, that weren't willing to practice Judaism or Islam under wraps. The modern Jews' presence in England was primarily driven by Sephardic Jews seeking refuge. New Christians, these are mulattoes, Moriscos, 1656. But yeah, this is my family's history. I have a lot more. These are a lot of the records. But I have baptism records, actually. And I'm actually working on a book to be able to upload a lot of things of that nature. Because after being able to trace them back to Morocco through the claiming of the Moroccan government in 1786, I was actually able to identify the root of the Holliday name, and finding out that it means landowner, and the fact that Mayor Leonard Holliday reestablished Mooresville, and that my people continue to be farmers, but tracing them back to Morocco, knowing that the Mali Empire was in the 14 and 1500s doing the same thing in West Africa that they were doing in England, would be the Dioula people. And this is why the Moroccan government would begin to claim my people, because these people are still over in the land today. They just happen to be scattered into England because of the Assyrian captivity in 722 BC. So, yeah, this is Jacoya.